Welcome to the Ironwood Strength Show. This is episode 6, Saturday, November 4th, 2023. Today I'm going to go over the warm up. Just basically, not going to get too much into the physiological aspect or the science aspect of it. I want to stick more to um, the practical and applied part. I will give some of the hows and whys, but I don't want to get too in depth. I want to stick to how to do it, and not necessarily how, but I will just see how it goes. Um, so first, one of the main problems with warming up is that people just don't want to warm up, and I see that as, and I've been there. Sometimes I'm still there today, um, but that is the absolutely wrong path to go. So, um, why don't people want to warm up? For me, usually now currently, it's because I have to get somewhere fast, or I don't have a lot of time available, and I just want to get to the main part of the workout and get it over and move on. Um, I think the bigger reason is people don't see the relevance or the importance. Certainly, when I was younger, that was true. I remember. I'll give you two instances here. One is when I was in high school. I was in wrestling, and our coach would always tell us before a meet that we needed to warm up. We should get a sweat going before we stepped on the mat to for our match. And I always thought, I was like, why do I want to get a sweat going? I'm gonna wear myself out in the warm up. I need that energy for to actually wrestle. So I mean, I did everything I was supposed to do, but at the same time, I just didn't see that relevance, and he probably didn't explain it the best to us as why we needed that. Um, Later on, after high school, I was almost done with college. I was doing my internship at Arizona State University, and working with Rich Winter. And we didn't train together per se, but we trained at the same time. So we'd go in there. I would do something really quick to warm up, and then just jump into my workout. He would go in and spend, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes going through different lunge variations, different mobility drills to get himself warmed up to lift. Um, and at one point he asked me, he goes, "Do you ever warm up?" And I thought I was warming up. Um, Looking back at it now, I mean, that was probably the dumbest way to go about warming up. I don't remember what I did. I just know it was really short and quick, and I just jumped into whatever I had planned for that day. But really, from a perspective of, looking at it now, I can see where how important that warm up is, and I still don't think that we really, as coaches or as lifters that have been around a while, do a great job of communicating that uh, to those that are younger, or those that don't have the knowledge base, um, or whatever the case may be. But basically, any athlete that's getting ready for, or if you're just doing a workout, anyone who's participating in some sort of athletic activity needs to go through a warm up to get the most out of that athletic activity. It doesn't matter if you are just going out for you're a long distance runner, or you're an elite level football player. You need to have a solid warm up before you begin your activity. Depending on what that activity is, will depict how long of a warm up you need, or how strenuous of a warm up you need. Um, so you need to take that sort of into consideration. So if you're there's basically two parts to a warm up. Okay, there's the general warm up, and then there's a specific warm up. So I'm going to look at this first in terms of uh, uh, let's look at a power lifter or someone that's warming up to bench. Their general warm up is could be, and then I'll look at it as a different I'll look at a volleyball player, um, and how those warm-ups follow the same basic structure, general to specific, but they may differ in how to and what they do, and the length of those warm-ups. So, but they're still going to have that general warm up and then the specific warm up. So, a general warm up for someone going into bench, whether it's a power lifter or whether it's just your average gym goer, um, your general warm up is going to be different upper body mobility work, uh, arm swings. And this is just an example, but it could be different sorts of arm swings. You might tie in some self myofascial release or SMR. That would be your foam rolling. That would be getting the stick out and rolling. I like to roll my forearms, both sides of my forearms, my biceps and my triceps with the stick um, prior to benching. Other things you can roll, you can get on a barbell and roll your pec. You can do that with a baseball. You can get your upper back with a peanut. The peanut is basically two baseballs or tennis balls taped together, and I think they actually make some of those things as well. I don't know what the names of them are, the ones that they sell, but you roll it on your spine so that that center part doesn't actually roll on your spine, but you roll both sides of your back. But that's going to help get you kind of loosened up, to kind of stimulate your nervous system to a certain degree, and then you'd move on to something like arm swings, different variations of arm swings, overhead arm swings, across the chest arm swings, arm circles, things of that nature. You're going to want to do some things to start utilizing some weight, where that could be different shoulder exercises, maybe some light tricep work, some band push downs, maybe even some dumbbell bench or some push-ups. And then that would be your general warm-up. And then your specific warm-up, you would get into actually bench pressing. Okay, start with the bar, move up. And this depends on how much you bench, but let's say you're working with someone that benches around 300 pounds, and their training weight for the day is 265. So you need to warm up to 265. So you're going to do the bar, you're going to do 95 pounds, you're going to do 135 pounds, you're going to do 185, 225, maybe 245, and then you go to 265. Okay. Now, you don't want that to be exhaustive. You just want the specific part of the warm up is to target and to start uh, focusing on technique. So, focus on technique every single set. As the weight goes up, you're going to have more things come into play. When people overlook warming up with the bar, I think it's extremely important. Whether you're a 100-pound bencher or whether you're a 500-pound bencher, warm up with the bar first. Okay, do that first set with the bar. Maybe 10 to 20 reps. Just feel everything. Go through the range of motion. Doesn't need to be explosive. Doesn't need to be super slow. Just go through it, but feel how everything feels. Then put 95 on. Do it for 5, 135 for 5, 185 for 3, 225 for 3. Remember, we're warming up to 265, and you're going to do whatever sets and reps at 265. After 185, 225 for 1, 245 for 1, put 265 on, do your working sets there. Okay, that's your bench press warm up that you're going to work from general mobility stuff, flexibility, maybe some activation work, whatever joints you need to target to kind of get them working, loosened up, get the blood flowing. Blood flow is extremely important. We always want blood flow. And then move into your specific warm-up, which will continue generating more blood flow and warming up those joints all the way to the point you're ready to go. The specific warm-up, though, is extremely important in getting your nervous system firing the way you want it to fire prior to that top set. I've seen so many people come in. This is an example of what not to do. Throw 135 on the bar, maybe do a couple arm swings and just jump down and go. I've even seen 225. No warm up whatsoever. Throw 225 on the bar and start doing sets there. I'm not talking about 600-pound benchers doing this. I'm talking about people that only bench 275 and they want to come in and start at 185, 225 because they don't want to take the time to warm up. That's absolutely the wrong way to go. It's actually setting yourself up for injury in the long run. So, best word of advice, the reason you want to do this, get yourself warmed up, have a better workout, prevent injuries by preparing your body for what you're getting ready to do. Now let's look at a volleyball player. The same thing is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to get loosened up mobility wise, get your joints prepared as far as being able to move properly. Probably even more important for a volleyball player, but be able to move properly. So the mobility, the flexibility part, that's still needs to be there. Continue with the general warm up. So how would you start with a volleyball player? You could still start foam rolling. It's a very good thing to start with. Start with foam rolling and then move into a dynamic warm up. Some of the simple basic movement pattern stuff, such as shuffling, karaoke, light jog, light jog back and forth. Maybe some A skip, B skip, trying to get proper sprinting mechanics down. And all this just leads into, you start with that light jog, maybe some shuffling, then get to karaoke, and you just keep progressing to more specific, to where you get into your A skips, your B skips, and then you start maybe do some agility work. It doesn't need to be long and drawn out. You don't need to set up cones to do this. You can just have them sprint across the court, change directions with proper mechanics, and sprint back. Okay, then you rest a little bit, do another one the opposite direction, sprint across, change directions turn the opposite way when you change directions, sprint back. That's simple agility work that can be done in the warm-up without having to have this whole elaborate setup. Then move on to volleyball. You're going to want to do some jumping stuff, especially for your jumpers or for your hitters and for your blockers. Your DSs, you might not want to emphasize the jumping as much. Maybe you're doing something different that's more ground based for them. Maybe some tumbling or some rows or some rolls to get them used to being on the ground more. That's going to be the more specific part. It's just progressing to specific. Then that part may take 10 to 15 minutes doing that general warm-up. Then you're going to progress into more of the specific warm-up, where, remember, bench pressing, you actually started benching with very light weights. Start with the bar and progress. Volleyball, maybe just some simple passing drills. Just working on passing, where we're bumping, and then progress into different drills where you're doing it at the net or whatever. This is basic things that you see at every volleyball match and probably every volleyball practice. I'm just classifying it more as your general and specific warm-up. Okay. Things that I like to focus on when I'm setting up a warm-up. Okay. Now I probably should have went over this stuff first. You don't need to overanalyze this too much, but you want to hit certain things. Foam rolling is always a good way to start. I probably don't do enough of it, but that's going to help with your flexibility component. That's going to help stimulate the nervous system to a certain degree, and it's releasing. It's what it says it is, myofascial release. So it's that fascia that's covering the muscles. It's kind of releasing that so your muscles can start to essentially stretch or move better. So that's always something that I would have in there at the start. Then do a dynamic flexibility. This is It's actually an extremely important part that a lot of people like to skip. They'll, if they do the foam rolling, they'll probably skip the dynamic flexibility later. But you do want to get that dynamic flexibility in there. You lose a lot of flexibility and mobility as you age. Okay, and you don't want to start when you're 35, 40, 45 years old to do dynamic flexibility. Okay, you need to start that and continue it when you're young, and then continue it in as you age. And I remember hearing a number of how much the percentage of hip mobility you actually lose as you age. I don't remember what it is, but it's pretty significant. I can tell you, as a 44-year-old lifter, my hip mobility has decreased. Um, I cannot. I do dynamic flexibility before every single workout, and I used to be able to kick my toes above my head. I can't even come close. I'm not even sure I get to my chin anymore with my toes. So that has definitely decreased, and I do it regularly. Okay, I still do it regularly. For my shoulders have I've lost almost all my mobility in my shoulders. Okay, and I'll put something out probably later this week a little bit about some shoulder mobility stuff that you can do. Um, but you really need to embrace staying mobile, and you got to start that young, and then maintain what you have, because you're gonna lose it as you get older, even if you're doing it. Don't wait, because it's gonna be a lot worse later on. Um, but that should be included in almost this. These are how I like to set the warm up. Is that you start with that foam rolling self myofascial release, then you move to your dynamic flexibility and mobility section, and then you move into your weighted stuff, even if it's just body weight. But I would go with activation exercises. If you remember back in the early late 2000s, early 2010s era, activation exercises were huge, and I do actually think that they help and make a difference. And that's going to be, it can be anything that's going to help kind of turn your nervous system on as far as what you're wanting to utilize. And the first time I remember hearing about it was everyone thought the glutes were dead and you had to activate the glutes. Um, oh, their glutes aren't firing. Their glutes aren't firing. Okay, they're squatting 800 pounds. What do you mean their glutes aren't firing? How are they able to do that if their glutes aren't working? Um, or they're sprinting a 10-3 or a 10-4 100-meter sprint at the college level. Their glutes aren't firing. Their glutes are probably firing, but we do need to turn those muscle groups on so they fire more efficiently from an earlier standpoint. So I still like those things, and it doesn't just have to be the glutes. It could be any muscle group that you're going to utilize. Um, so if you're getting ready to bench, you want to turn your triceps on. Do activation exercises for your triceps. Um, Activation exercises for your hamstrings. Activation exercises for if you're getting ready to squat or sprint or play almost any sport. Get those hamstrings firing. It can be anything that you need you're going to be utilizing. You want to get that stuff kind of turned on before you start. And it doesn't have to be. I used to always think of it as it needs to be um, like an isometric exercise to activate the glutes. That's how it started with, you got to do glute bridges before you start your workout to activate your glutes. Well, it doesn't have to be glute bridges. You can do a number of things. It doesn't have to be isometric. It can be a number of things that actually focus on that particular muscle group, whatever you're working at, and it can still be activation. Um, then you'll move into, and I'd still classify this as activation really, but the major groups that you're going to utilize. So if you're getting ready to squat, you did some activation for your glutes, maybe you did something light for your hamstrings. Well, you also need to get your low back working. All right, because that's going to be extremely important in helping stabilize that weight. And squatting big weights is having your low back working properly. So maybe tossing some reverse hypers. I remember looking back at, I'll get into that in a second. And then from there, I'm ready to go to my specific warm up. So that's kind of how I set things up. SMR, self myofascial release, or foam rolling. Then I'm going to go into my flexibility, mobility. Then I'm going to go to activation exercises. And then I'm going to go to the actual specific warm up. And I use that basic pattern for most of the teams that I worked with in most workouts. And I utilize the same thing for myself. Now, what I was actually doing might be different depending upon the sport and the time allotted or the conditions of the workout, but it was generally that same basic pattern. Now, if I had a team coming to me after practice, I might eliminate some of those things because they're basically coming to me already warmed up and we don't need to rehash everything. Certain things I still wanted to get working. If sprinters came to me after their practice, we would still go through some hamstring activation stuff, some glute activation stuff prior to lifting, just because of the importance of those muscle groups. And it also helped them mentally get focused for the workout. So I would still put those things in there, but I didn't see a need with track athletes to do a lot of dynamic flexibility after their workout because they already did it and before their workout. They already did that. Um, they just finished their workout. They're coming to me. We don't need to do that again. Okay. Um, so in that sort of circumstance, I did alter the workout, but almost all my workouts followed that basic pattern that I just went over. Okay. So here's a couple other things that I've seen work, or I've done. I remember Westside Barbell. Louis Simmons used to talk about uh, GPP a lot, talked about sled dragging a lot, and they would actually utilize. I don't know that everyone did it from what I've heard, but I know he did mention it many times before you go in the lift, go out and drag the sled. You know, and it didn't need to be a lot. I forget what he wanted to do. I know when I did it, I was training with Jim Roney at the time, and we would do 600 yards of sled dragging prior to the workout. The first time I did that, um, really kind of tanked my workout because it kind of showed how bad a shape I was in. But then I got to where 600 yards was almost nothing. But I'd go in, I'd be very warmed up and ready to go. The downside with that is it didn't address the mobility or the flexibility portions at all. It probably did have an activation component because if you're dragging the sled forwards, you're getting your hamstrings and you're getting your glutes with every step. If you turn around and drag it backwards, you're getting your quads. So you're turning those muscle groups on just by dragging the sled. But it's not addressing the range of motion factor. It's not addressing the flexibility. It's not addressing self myofascial release. It doesn't mean you can't do some of that stuff prior to dragging the sled. It just means that just dragging the sled probably is insufficient. Another thing that they did that I have heard that they did at Westside Barbell is reverse hypers prior to the workout. They would do it heavier later in the workout, but prior to the workout, they would have reduced load and do I don't even know what they did, 2 or 3 sets of 20 prior to working out. But that would go much better as far as probably utilizing a better range of motion and a better probably turn some of those muscle groups on a little bit better, especially get the low back a little bit better than just sled dragging. Maybe a combination of the two, sled dragging and reverse hypers, would be more optimal. But I still think that it's missing some components there from a general health perspective that um, that needs to be in there, and that's that self myofascial release and the active or dynamic flexibility portion. Um, and I've done that. I've done the sled dragging. I like that quite a bit actually. And there's different sled dragging variations that you can do that would accomplish different things better than just going forwards and backwards. But it is definitely sufficient as far as getting blood flow to the proper regions prior to squatting or deadlifting. Another warm up that I came about recent or there was some, I'm going to go back to some others. Back in the late 2000s, I think. Mid to late. Probably mid 2000s. A couple videos came out. I think they were Eric Cressy's videos. One was entitled Magnificent Mobility. The other one was entitled Inside Out, which was Magnificent Mobility was all lower body stuff, hitting all different types of, man, I haven't seen that. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I'm trying to remember it, but it hit different. It really hit the activation portion of kind of body weight, targeted more the hips. Okay, loosening up the hips prior to a workout, which would actually went very much into preventing a lot of injuries because you had your hips thoroughly warmed up and trained through different ranges of motion prior to going out to do sprinting, agility work, or whatever, or even just playing whatever sport you're in. Probably not as, although you could take many elements from it, um, probably not quite as relevant to just lifting. Um, the Inside Out was more focused on the shoulders and how you should warm those shoulders up prior to training, and went into improving shoulder health. But those two were pretty big and definitely good starting points for learning how to warm up prior to activity. There was also, more recently, Matt Winning came out with the Winning Warm Up. This is, I do like this. I do still think it neglects some things, but I started putting it into my own training. His points were that it more specifically targeted what you were going to be training. It activated the muscle groups that you needed to turn on. And this is the first time I really started to think, hey, you don't actually have to do isometrics to activate muscle groups. You can do higher reps and just do regular concentric reps to target those muscle groups. And it increased, for him, it increased GPP, which was good. I don't think this should be, and I do think it does that. I don't necessarily, GPP is a whole nother discussion. This probably doesn't fit on this video. But I'll get into that later. But his and I've not purchased his materials. I'm only going by what I heard him say in one discussion, and I haven't discussed it with him, so I haven't clarified anything. I'm only going by what he said. So he utilizes 3 exercises, and he puts them in a circuit, and he does it. He tries to keep that, I believe, in 10 to 12 minutes is his time frame that he wants to get it done. Go through that circuit 4 times. Okay, so if his main exercise of the day is a bench press, he's going to pick 3 exercises to help get him ready for the bench press. The first exercise will be a movement resembling the movement that he's going to do. So in bench press, he would be dumbbell bench. If he was doing incline, he would do an incline, dumbbell incline at that same incline he's going to be doing for the workout. If he's squatting, he's going to be utilizing maybe a belt squat. Okay. If he's deadlifting, maybe pull throughs. I'm just kind of guessing at that, but the first movement of that circuit, 3 exercise circuit, is going to resemble the exercise that he's going to be doing for the main exercise of the day. The second exercise will be an exercise targeting probably the most important, or a main muscle group that he's going to be utilizing. So if it's bench press, band push downs, a tricep exercise basically. If it's squatting, maybe band leg curls to get the hamstrings going. And the third exercise I was a little bit more unclear of. I know for the lower body, he wanted to hit the lats because he felt that was an area that he needed. I could even see him doing that for upper body, so maybe lat pulls for lower body, and then for upper body, maybe he's doing some sort of rows. But he doesn't want it to be too overly taxing at the same time. So he probably wouldn't be doing like a barbell row. It'd probably be more like a seated row, or a row maybe face down on an incline bench, or even a flat bench. Um, so those would be the 3 exercises. Each one will be 25 reps. That would keep him from utilizing too much weight because he doesn't want it to be too heavy. Um, he emphasized that very strenuously, that he wanted an optimal weight where he's getting warmed up, he's building work capacity or GPP, but he's not taxing himself. If he's doing sets of 10, he can really start jacking that weight up there. Whereas if he's doing sets of 25, he's still going to be getting that burn, but he's not, and getting warmed up, but he's not going to be overtaxing himself to where it's negatively affecting the workout. Because he's going to be more willing to keep the weight at a lighter level or at a lower level. So he goes through those 3 exercises, 25 reps each, lightweight, goes through the circuit 4 times, tries to have that done in under 12 minutes. Okay, therefore it's not taking a ton of time. The downside to it is I still don't feel that it embraces the need for dynamic flexibility. It doesn't address the self-myofascial release component. And self-myofascial release, don't overthink that. It's basically a massage. I'm using the big term because you're doing it yourself, and that's the fitness term for it. But it's basically massage that is going to help you prior to your workout, and it has been very beneficial. It does eliminate you having to go pay someone to get that done, or take a lot of time for, if you're an athlete at a school that has an athletic trainer that will do it. You don't have to take a lot of time to go in and have them do that prior. You can just get on a foam roller, roll out, use the stick, use the peanut, whatever. There's several different tools out there that you can use. So I'm getting off topic. I'm getting sidetracked there, but so that's a few different warm-up options. Again, I cannot overemphasize enough how important the warm-up is. The dynamic flexibility, mobility portion is something that's going to help with health long term. You need to start it when you're young. Continue doing it all the way until you're aging, or until you quit working out, however old you are when that happens. And then the other things are to get blood flow. Dynamic flexibility also gets blood flowing and helps improve the workout, and helps prevent injuries. So those things do need to happen. The one thing I will go into, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, stop stretching. Stop with the static stretching prior to working out. Quit telling your athletes that that's beneficial. Static stretching, I'm not against static stretching. Actually, I think it's a very important thing to do. I don't do nearly enough of it. But don't do it prior to the workout. I wouldn't do it at all, except in limited cases. And those are cases where you actually specifically need a certain stretch, or to get a certain muscle group stretched prior to doing things, because you don't have, it's very difficult to get that muscle group the range of motion that you need without doing static stretching. Static stretching puts your muscles to sleep. Okay, that's why you want to do it after, and I want to emphasize the word after, your workout or your competition. And I do think that athletes would be strong. It's going to benefit them so much to stretch after a game. I've only seen one team do this. Okay, and that was a soccer team that I worked with many years ago. They would actually stretch after practice and after a game. Don't do it ahead of time. All right, you're putting your muscle groups to sleep. You're inhibiting your CNS from firing properly. All movement is based off the CNS, the central nervous system. You don't want to inhibit it. You want to activate the central nervous system. That's why the mobility, the dynamic flexibility Flexibility of movement is what dynamic flexibility is. Active flexibility. Mobility work that involves movement. Those all activate the nervous system. Your activation exercises help activate the nervous system, um, as their name implies. Static flexibility inhibits the nervous system. Stop doing it before workouts. Um, you are actually, in my very strong opinion, and from the research that I've done, uh, research as in looking information up. I've never been in a lab. I've never sat there and analyzed information from a scientific standpoint. I'm going off of information that I've read over the years. Um, you're actually setting yourself up for greater injury rates by static stretching. So please stop doing it prior to activity. After is okay because it only inhibits for a certain amount of time, and then you're going to reactivate, um, or your nervous system will go back to normal or after a while. But prior to activity, I strongly encourage you to cut that um, out of your workouts. It still kills me with all the knowledge we have today that I'm still hearing coaches say we need to stretch before we go out there so we don't get hurt. It actually makes you more likely to get hurt if you're static stretching. Just sitting there holding a position to stretch does not help. Okay? It's 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 I'm lost the term, but it's not helping you. You need to warm up with movement. All right? You're going to perform with movement. You need to warm up with movement. Um, the exception to that is that I've had, and this is the extreme cases, the hundreds or thousands of, I don't even know how many athletes I've worked with over the years, because I worked from 2000. The first time I had my own team was in 2005. Okay. And I would lead workouts prior to that, but the first time I had my own team was in 2005 all the way to 2018. Um, I only had two athletes in all those years that needed static stretching prior to performing an activity. We would still go through the entire warm up first. And when I say they needed it, they needed it. It wasn't, well, I still feel tight. I think I should stretch my hamstrings. It wasn't like that. They had such mobility issues that they couldn't perform. I'll go one girl in particular. She's a volleyball athlete. She could not perform a proper squat without even after a sufficient warm up. Even trying to go through the specific warm up after she went through all the general stuff that I would talked about, she still had trouble um, squatting correctly and could not get deep enough. Okay, because the we at a certain level I wanted them to squat to. It was the crease of their hip at or below the top of their knee. She couldn't even get there. She was 3 inches high, 4 inches high, could not get there. Um, so I would do specific stretches with her after the warm up as she was going through her warm up sets. She would come to me in between sets and I would do specific stretches for her. And by the end of the day, it may take a couple of her work sets too, but she would be squatting to proper depth. Um, that is one of the extreme cases. Most people just need to kind of let themselves get down if they're having trouble getting to depth. She was an extreme case. Okay, remember, two athletes in 2005 to 2018, 13 years. Okay, that needed static stretching prior to or in order to achieve proper range of motion while they were working out. So very rare, um, but those cases do exist. You know, if you have something that's too tight, you're having trouble with it, go ahead, hit it real quick. But most of the time, you don't need that. So I would eliminate static stretching from your vocabulary until after activity, which I think it is very important. Another great time for static stretching is prior to going to bed, or late in the evening when everything's kind of calmed down and you're starting to relax, your body's relaxing, then static stretch. Best time to stretch because your body's already relaxed. Now you can actually get something out of your static stretching. But we're getting way past the warm up now and into what happens later. That is it for today. That's the Ironwood Strength Show for today. Please, if you're liking what you see on these videos, subscribe to the channel, like the individual videos, and I will see you next time on the Ironwood Strength Show.